Let's see. Okay, that's good. A lot of things happening here. The lights in my office decided to drop on me over Shabbos because of a blackout, I suspect.
Hey.
And a bunch of other things going on in the house. So 1 second. We're almost there. All right. Okay, because I'm going to do some reading to you tonight. If you like to be read a bedtime story, tonight's the night. Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. Sorry for the delayed start. Mute all before Anita reminds me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. So I'd like to speak to you about, that's working. Okay. The ability to see the truth. The ability to see the truth. It is actually very hard to see the truth. Very hard to see the truth. The reason why it's very hard to see the truth is because the truth can be painful. The truth doesn't necessarily align all the time with our with what we want or with what we think is best for us, or it doesn't align with what will really is really the reason why, what it will be comfortable for us right now. So because we don't want to be uncomfortable, we desperately fight to make sure that we're comfortable. Therefore, sometimes we will defend a position, sometimes even unconsciously, not even knowing or realizing consciously that the position we are defending, we ourselves know is not really an honestly correct position, but it's just keeping our space secure. I hope that makes some sense. I hope you understand what I'm saying when I say that. So that's the reason why I am sometimes terrified to tell people my honest opinion. Like if they'll ask me like how to deal with something or how to do something, sometimes I'm very scared to share what I really feel, because if I share what I really feel, I'm concerned that they're not ready to hear what I am going to share. It's very, very tricky. And if you remember, I shared a few weeks ago in a conversation I had with a gentleman who was telling me he was feeling anxious. And I told him, because you're a good friend, I'm going to tell you what I really think. Now, part of what I was saying when I said that was that I was actually sort of prepping him to say, I'm telling you what I really think now. I'm not telling you something nice, and I'm not packaging it. I'm saying it because I want to get the biggest bang for my punch. That means I'm going to punch you now, and you're going to feel it. But I'm doing it for you. I'm not doing it because I want to punch you. I'm doing it because you need this punch, and you called me because you want this punch. But sometimes when we get the punch, we regret it. We say, oh my gosh, I didn't really want this. I didn't realize it was going to be this. So there are two things. There's prepping ourselves to become a person who can hear the truth. You know, I would say that the one of the safe ways of doing that is by telling ourselves that even though I hear the truth, I'm not necessarily committing to following the truth. This may sound crazy to be hearing from me, but I really mean this. Sometimes you need to tell yourself, I am going to hear the truth, but I'm not committing to following it. Why? The reason why is because then you can safely hear and acknowledge the truth, because that's not a commitment on your side. Say, well, if it's the truth, I have to do it. No, I do things which I know are not really so good for me, right? All the time. I say things that I really are ultimately not beneficial, but I say them because it's a good vent in the moment, even though the recovery time from that's going to be quite a while, because there's a lot to pay from saying certain things. Sometimes I eat certain things which I feel all night, right? Oh, there was for that moment that made me feel really comfortable. I really felt good, but that was like 60 seconds of pleasure, and boy, wow. right? The hours of discomfort from it. That's the way we are, right? So I may even know that I shouldn't eat this, but I'm eating it. I'm eating it. I know I shouldn't, and I'm eating it. So that's a level of honesty that someone can have, and also a level of relationship with an honest relationship with who we are, that I'm an imperfect person and I will sometimes do things which are not. Now, of course, I'm not saying we should embrace this as a way of life, but I'm just saying in our approach to become better people, we can acknowledge that yes, sometimes I know something is right and I don't do it. With the, of course, with always with the intention that I will do it less. And with time we will improve. And I want to acknowledge what is true, even though I may not be committed to it, so that when I get stronger and I'm ready to commit, I will commit to it. That's the whole idea. So the thing is that the main point I want to discuss and then get to the story I wanted to share, which was very, very moving to me, is that there are two things. There's one is being able to hear the truth. That's me being able to hear the truth. So if I go to a true guide or a true mentor, whatever you want to call it, a true coach who really is in it for me, they're not in it for themselves, and they will, and they guide me courageously. Guiding me courageously means that they will tell me what I really need to hear, not what I want to hear. If they are a part of me feeling comfortable, they're a part of the problem. They have to be someone who's willing to tell me the truth. And if they're very gifted, then they know how to tell it to me in a way that I'm not threatened by it. And sometimes that means that they have to develop a relationship with me, or I have to develop a relationship with them, however you want to position it, with time, so that there's a comfort level, because sometimes you have to wait for the relationship to evolve before you can say certain things to somebody. You have to have that relationship to be able to say it. So I want to share an incident that happened with a very, very unique rabbi and obviously a very special woman. And where the rabbi chose to tell the woman in a very, very highly sensitive, regarding a very highly sensitive matter, to tell the woman what he really knew to be true for her. And she resisted what he told her, because it's like almost, how could she not? And yet he insisted, no, I'm not letting you off. And he continued to insist, and until she accepted it. And when she wrote about it that she was able to acknowledge the great courage that he had to be able to tell this to her. Okay, who is the rabbi? The rabbi is one of my favorite rabbis. As far as someone who is who I didn't know personally, but I know through reading his books, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, who was a very, very unique individual. And I will tell you that Rabbi Steinsaltz, I'm saying this Ilui Nishmasei, in his memory, because he passed away less than 30 days ago. And so I'm speaking about him in his memory. This should stand in good merit for him. He would often say things that were very, very testy to the listener. He would often challenge people in ways that sometimes a significant portion of the crowd that he was speaking to, who was public speech, could not swallow what he said. I'm not sure if I shared this with you or not, but I'm going to, because I really love it. I heard this a few times. He once got up in a modern Orthodox synagogue, I think it was, in Manhattan. And you have to know Rabbi Steinsaltz to be able to appreciate this scene, but you'll take it for just the way I'm delivering it. Rabbi Steinsaltz was a person, as I think I shared with you, I'm not even sure, you'll let me know with a nod of the head, but he shared that he's not romantic, but he's sentimental, I think is the way he described it. So he was a person who really despised all of the classic, honors and acknowledgments that are always given to people when they're introduced and they're called up and they're this and that, and all of this, like what he would consider to be more than anything else, flattery. And I'm not going to get into that whole conversation. Yes, there's a place for it, and you have to acknowledge people properly, et cetera, et cetera. But he really didn't like that. So anyway, he got up in a and therefore he would not bestow upon other people platitudes, these words of whatever. See, God gets up in the synagogue. You have to understand the synagogue, I guess, probably hired him, paid for him to come and give and speak in their synagogue. And Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz is a world-renowned scholar. It was a great honor to have him. So you imagine that itself already, when someone pays me to come and give a talk, I feel somewhat beholden to them. I want to please them. So he gets up to give this talk, and he says this was, I think, in the middle of davenings. He must have been there for a Shabbaton, for a Shabbos. And he was one that to give the Dvar Torah, like Nason did this past Shabbos. Hopefully he got paid more than you did, Nason. So, he gets up and he says, sitting in this synagogue, I feel like I'm in an Episcopalian church. That's what he says. Can you imagine? He was hired by the synagogue, and he gives like the most unbelievable insult. He says, I feel like I'm in an Episcopalian church. And then he explained what he meant. He said, in a church, Gentiles, everything is very structured and orderly and timely. And he says, everyone in this synagogue, the service starts at 9 o'clock. You walk in at 9 o'clock. Everyone sits, everyone stands, everyone stands. The service is over, everyone leaves. Kiddush, everyone goes to the Kiddush. It's like, clockwork. He says, is anyone actually making an effort to have a conversation with God? Did you ever get stuck in a conversation with God so you couldn't just walk out? You're in the middle of the conversation like you are with your friends. So the Kiddush is going to wait because you're in the middle of a great conversation. That ever happened to you? He says, if that doesn't happen, what's going on over here? That was basically his point. But of course, he said it in a way that was very jarring, right? And you need to be a person who understands the context of who Rabbi Steinsaltz is, and also to appreciate his message enough that the insult becomes a sour pickle. It's sour, but it's so enjoyable. Okay, I hope someone's with me over here. So, yeah. So this what I'm sharing with you now. I'm going to be reading from a post that a Chabad shlucha, her name is Hindi Swerdlov, who lives in Yerushalayim. She's an American girl from Los Angeles, and she's married to her husband. I know the sweetest guy in the world, and a very person who has been doing some great things in Israel. And actually, when a boy when a boy goes to Israel to have a bar mitzvah at the Jerusalem Wall, I put them in touch with Yossi Swerdlov, Rabbi Yossi Swerdlov, her husband. So they had a tragedy in their life, a big tragedy, and they lost their young daughter, Shula. So big tragedy. I don't remember how old the girl was, maybe 3 years old or something like that. Very big tragedy, which is beyond description. That's all I'm going to say. And yeah. So she said that she had somewhat a relationship with Rabbi Steinsaltz. And she went after she had lost her daughter, she was devastated beyond the imagination. And she went to speak to Rabbi Steinsaltz. And essentially, she cried herself out to Rabbi Steinsaltz. Rabbi Steinsaltz listened like a father. That was the way she related to him. That was the relationship she had, which is really beautiful. And good. She said 3 years later, I met Rabbi Steinsaltz at his son's birthday party. Adult son, obviously. At Rabbi Steinsaltz's adult son, it was a birthday party. And she said that he immediately asked me how I was really, she writes in caps, how I was really doing. And he brought up details of our private meeting 3 years prior. So in other words, he was very in touch with, he didn't forget for one moment what she shared with him, and he wanted to know how she's really doing. And she said, of course, I burst into tears and said that 3 years with Shula gone, with her daughter gone, still felt impossible to survive. So she says, we chatted on the couch there for 20 minutes. And then she writes in parentheses, okay, I chatted. Now she spoke for 20 minutes and he listened. And at this time, Rabbi Steinsaltz spoke with me a bit more strongly. He told me, now I want you to understand that I'm going to assume that you're going to experience what Rabbi Steinsaltz told her as harsh, as I do, harsh, but only from a person that really, really cares. In other words, only someone who really, really cares can say such thing. Only someone who's cruel or really cares would say such a thing. Either someone is trying to hurt you or someone really cares about you. Those are the only types of people that would say these things. And I also want you to hear what he tells her, okay, which is very profound as well. So he told me that I wasn't doing enough to let Shula go. I wasn't doing enough, he told the mother, of letting your daughter go. And although it's important to never forget her, there is a healthy way to move forward with the grief. And clearly, I wasn't doing that, and I was making my whole family suffer because of it. Do you see how far he goes? That's how courageous Rabbi Steinsaltz was, that he was willing to call her out 100% in her grief. And it's the worst grief a person can have. But he still did it because he wanted to really help her. She said, this shocked me as I had been in therapy and I thought my progress in living in my new normal was exemplary. And I told him so. He humored me with a nod and made it clear that he didn't agree. He said that Shula was just a small girl of 3, and although she must have been great in her lifetime because she so quickly completed her purpose, so she must have been a great girl, she must have had a pretty small bank account. He went into such detailed description here that I laughed so loudly by his outrageous comments. So all the hard work of events and classes, having written the Torah and opening a children's library, I was trying to accomplish in her memory all of these things. And she lists a whole bunch of things that she did from her memory. He told her all of these things was for me. She said, he's told her, you didn't do this for her. You did this for yourself. Since her pure soul didn't actually need it. Your daughter is fine. Her pure soul went back to heaven, and your daughter is doing fantastic. So why are you doing all of these things? You are really doing them for yourself. Okay, very harsh, very, very harsh. Okay, but just continue listening. Because I'm repeating this because I hear all of the truth in what he says, and I understand what a difficult pill it is to swallow. And I'm reading it because she herself shared it, and she swallowed the pill. You see, if the mentor says this to the mentee, right, and the mentee can't receive it, the mentor made a very big miscalculation. And usually there's a major fallout. But Rabbi Steinsaltz has the wisdom to know she could hear it, and she heard it. That's the beauty over here. She was able to hear the very, very, very hard, such a hard truth. I hope none of us ever are tested with such a hard truth to hear. So he continued, he told me he was happy if it made me feel better. I'm happy you did all those things because it made you feel better. That's a good thing. And then he smirked. And he continued that the only way I would truly affect her soul was by my happiness and the happiness which I perpetuated around me. I needed to make a daily choice to be optimistic and positive since Shula no longer needed me, as her job title in her new life was no longer as my daughter. She needed permission from me to be free to live life in another capacity, and I had to stop dragging her down here. This has a lot to do with understanding the spiritual dynamics of a soul when it leaves this world. And the reason why we don't, which he's going to mention in a second, the reason why we don't go visiting a grave too frequently, because it disturbs the neshama. It makes the neshama anchor to this world. I can tell you many stories. The story with Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, once his son, um, he, um, he used to come to visit his son in dreams after he passed away, and then he stopped. And he explained to his son how it's very difficult for a soul from above to remain attached to the world. And every time an neshama has to come down, it's very painful for it to. And this was the point Rabbi Steinsaltz was conveying, that every time you're doing things for your daughter and you relentlessly, you're not letting your daughter move into her new space. So the detailed description of what her life may look like away from me was so outlandish that he had me laughing so hard again. He explained, so he did this mix of harshness and getting her to laugh very strongly. He explained to me what the process of visiting a grave does to the deceased soul and how I must stop visiting the shul so often. He went into dramatic detail here of comparisons. He said, you're like the shviger. You know what a shviger is? A mother-in-law that keeps repeating stories of the good life when her son lived with her and how much love they shared before you came around and took him away, right? So he said, you're doing the same thing with your daughter. He said, I need to stop behaving like a child who keeps picking her scab off his leg, just to glorify in the blood dripping down again and again. I just needed to let the healing begin. He explained where God came into the picture and where my lack of faith, though I thought I had plenty, was a testament to my hanging on to grief. My lack of faith was a testament, by the fact that I was hanging on to my grief. I fought him hard on this, but he smiled and repeated his mantra as many times as I fought him. We only survive in this world because Hashem's efforts make it possible daily. It has almost nothing to do with the level of our mourning or our trying to survive. We need to do our part, but ultimately it is our faith that trusts in Him, in God, that life is good and meaningful. And if we indeed believe that, our grief would be lessened and we can move forward. Because if I have faith that God is all good, then what God does is surely good as well. If I'm grief-stricken, I don't truly believe that God is good. He relentlessly continued by telling me that we are capable of surviving while holding memories and love of our deceased. He explained that the Lubavitcher Rebbe has guided us through so much of his teachings how to do this. Let go, but still live with them, as if they are part of your own body. By doing good deeds for their soul, which they don't need, but we do, we connect them to ourselves physically by becoming their hands and feet or mouths that do the mitzvah in their merit. This was a revolutionary thought for me. I spent years in therapy and still absolutely love to check in with the same incredible, she names her therapist, and read many books on grief. And yet no one had the guts, she's saying this, no one had the guts to say to me, let go of the grief, move on, it's time. I didn't realize that I could let go while still maintaining a relationship with Shula. He empowered and liberated me by demanding that I step up and be productive without all the self-pity. Rabbi Steinsaltz obviously saw deep within me that I was ready to hear this, and he went for the jugular. What's most fascinating is that I found his tough love talk so beneficial that I sent 3 other bereaved imams to him. And here's Rabbi Steinsaltz's genius. Not one of them had the same experience as me. He specifically catered his answers to each imam that came with questions. And to none of them did he use the same method of authority with his psychological Torah guidance. He just listened kindly and told them that they were on the right path for healing. Amazing to think that he really talked soul to soul to each individual that came to visit him. He knew what each person can handle and which direction he was able to encourage him or her. I'm sharing this. I'll tell you why I'm sharing this. I'm sharing this because I'm so inspired by this story. And I'm also inspired by Rabbi Steinsaltz's clarity of perspective in being able to understand the grief of a mother, what a mother really has to do, what this mother really needs to do in order to be able to move on, that she can hear this message of clarity, that the other mothers were not ready for it, so he didn't give that to them. And his clarity of actually stating what really will help you move on in life to this mother. And it really helped her. And she's so grateful that he had the guts to say that to her. So there's an art to being able to developing ourselves, to being able to hear the truth. It's not so common. But we can be people, individuals who can develop that. And we can also, and we can also be people, who can be genuine friends, who can actually tell other people. I'm not talking about such a severe situation where you really need to assess the other person, but on more day-to-day things, to be a genuine friend and tell the other person what they really need to hear, and not be the classic patronizing friend that just says what our friends want to hear, because why should I get into that with them? You know why you should get into that with them? Because you're a real friend. You're not just a social friend. That's why. And you want to, and the reality is this, that I'm sure all of us have had this experience once or a few times in our life, where someone said something that few other people were willing to say, and we thanked them for it. And the reason why we had to wait so long is because no other friend was friend enough to say it to us. That's called being a courageous friend. And that's an art. It's an art to how to say it, when to say it, to whom you can say it, to whom you can't say it. But sometimes, with a lot of the things in life which are not such deep, profound things like this, right? It's not, the risk is not high. And we discover that people really appreciate us when we really speak to them from what we know to be true. And our relationship deepens profoundly when we do that, as opposed to just giving all of the platitudes that are classically done. So that's what I share with you tonight. I hope you found it as meaningful and inspiring as I have. And you're welcome to, I can't do it, so I don't know how to do it, but you can unmute yourself. And any comments? I just got a couple of minutes, but we can take a couple of minutes of comments.
That's an amazing, Rebbe.
It's a very good topic.